This is Overdue Advice, the podcast about cash flow strategies to grow your business. Brought to you by MetCredit.
Everybody pay up!
Welcome to Overdue Advice. I'm your host, Andreas Schwabe. Overdue Advice is sponsored by MetCredit. MetCredit is Canada's leader in the ethical recovery of accounts receivable. They're debt collectors, and they're good at it. Finance is a broad business specialty with revenues, mergers and acquisitions, investments, and debt. Debt is the topic most leaders would rather avoid. Dealing with outstanding debt is what this podcast is all about. Each episode will cover a topic related to accounts receivable, like debt collection tips to survive an economic downturn, or the 3 most costly mistakes you can make with accounts receivable, or something as simple as tips to protect your credit score from identity theft. We'll cover everything related to outstanding debt and debt collection. Brian Summerfelt is the president and CEO of MetCredit. He's also one of our primary resources for this podcast. Brian's been a debt collector for decades, and in just a minute, he'll share his story about how he started really below the bottom and worked his way up to be the CEO of MetCredit. Now he not only wants businesses to think about their outstanding receivables, he also wants to transform how collections are done. Here's a conversation with MetCredit CEO Brian Summerfelt. Now, since this is episode 1, I figured it was appropriate to cover some personal history, the history of the company, and debt collection in general as a business. We start at the beginning, so I asked Brian, what is debt collection?
It's the process of pursuing debts owed by either a consumer or commercial company to another company. Well, remember, it's all about placing the onus of responsibility back on that person. It's their debt. They're responsible to pay it. We're not responsible to collect it.
Right.
Do you understand what I just said?
Yeah, no, it's,
okay.
Yeah.
So, this is why when we're training people, it's very important that they get accustomed to dealing with rebuttals that don't take people's dignity away, but also put that seed back to them to say, whatever that situation is, ultimately, you've got the power of the pen. Consequence for not paying, whether it's bad credit or getting sued, because we do that. But all that can happen and them still not pay.
Right.
It's just whether they want to avoid that or not. So how do we help them avoid that negative consequence?
Well, and that's I mean, you explain the consequences. Why would people choose not to pay their debt? Like, that's the question.
That's the magic question, isn't
and
it?
that just it. Like, that is the thing. Like, why would you choose? Let's talk about some of the consequences. Like, what are the consequences if people don't pay their debt once it's in your hands?
Well, it'll be ultimately reported to TransUnion and Equifax. It's on their credit bureau for 7 years. If it's a judgment, 10.
No.
Yeah.
Now,
go to get a new car, it's there. Go get a new house, it's there.
Now, does that just make borrowing impossible or just expensive?
Very challenging.
Okay. Huh.
You're going to go and negotiate a mortgage rate and you've got state things in your credit bureau?
Right.
I for younger people, it's very easy. It's all about planting seeds, painting a picture, okay? You've got a young man, he's 18, 19 years old, brand new relationship with a sweetheart, thinking about getting engaged, getting married. So he has some kids. They want to go buy a house. They go to a bank, try to get a mortgage. And the first thing that bank manager says to that young man is, well, hang on a second. You didn't pay your visa here 10 years ago. What was that all about? I mean, once it's on as a collection item, it's always going to be there as a collection item. Okay, it doesn't matter if it's $200 or $10,000. But to what extent did they have to go to collect that? That's a question.
Most people have about as much knowledge of debt collection as I had before I started working with MetCredit. And so let's talk about MetCredit first. Where does it come from?
The company started in 1973. The gentleman's name was Frank J. Riley here in Edmonton.
How big was MetCredit then?
Very small. 2 people. I was born in 1969, so yeah, I was only a couple years old. It was very scary business. It was what you think it is. The business has really evolved.
How is it different? Like, what are the differences?
Oh, we used to have a baseball bat in the office.
For what?
If somebody got out of control. I remember when there was a scissor attack at one time.
What?
Yeah.
What?
It's the truth.
Someone chasing you down the hall with a pair of scissors.
Pair of scissors. Yep.
Oh, man. And they were the round ones, I'm guessing.
No.
Holy cow.
That happens when you tell them to go and pawn off their wedding rings.
Oh.
Yeah.
And you don't do that anymore.
We don't do that anymore.
Okay. So what do you do? Like if you're not pawning off wedding rings, because that's what everyone's thinking.
They are.
Yeah.
But there was good reason, because that's the way the business used to be 20 years ago. It's not anymore.
And what changed and why?
Like any good business, it always evolves.
How did you get into this?
I was a debtor.
Were you?
I was.
Okay, this we got to talk about. So you got called by a debt collection agency?
I did. One of my competitors.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Okay.
Came up from University of Lethbridge and looking for a job. Didn't find a job in my major. Ignored my calls from the federal government. Ignored my calls from the collection agency until they got a hold of me. Had a $55,000 student loan.
Oh.
Yeah.
And what was your degree?
Bachelor of Management, specializing in psychology as a major. Yeah.
And so this is what...
I should have really moved out east and worked for one of the big unions or something like that, but I stayed in Alberta. And
so it was this late 80s, early 90s?
Early 90s.
Yeah, that was not a good time to
apply for a job and there'd be 50 guys at the door.
Yeah, I remember that.
It was really tough. So I did a few other odd jobs. Eventually I found my way to Met.
So now, did you end up there because of the debt?
No.
Oh. So they just called you and you thought, well, maybe
No,
that's
it happened right around the same time. I thought, okay, well, I think I can do this. I went, could be a part-time job, see what happens. And next thing you know, 25 years later, I own the company.
Just like that?
Just like that.
Yeah, easy peasy.
Easy peasy.
So you've really seen the business from, like, literally...
both sides.
Yeah, like mailroom all the way up kind of thing.
Yeah.
If you had a mailroom.
We do have a mailroom.
Oh, do you? You're big enough.
And I've worked in the mailroom.
Oh, have you?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you've literally worked from mailroom to CEO.
I have.
What's your favorite job?
Training. I don't really get a high of collecting anymore.
Yeah.
I get a high of watching somebody do it that I've trained.
Do you ever go on the floor?
I do all the time.
Do you?
Sure.
Really?
With the exception of our Edmonton office, I have an office in every... I have a physical office in Montreal, Vancouver, and Toronto. It's right on the collection floor. Keeps you in touch with the business.
Do you learn anything when you're talking to debtors throughout the years? Like, are there trends that you sort of get from them?
Other than as I get old, they get old. You got a lot more to relate.
What's the number one reason for people going into debt?
Addiction, depression, divorce.
So just the human condition.
That's right.
Just sort of yeah.
That's why it's a very human business.
Right.
We don't sell cars. It's all about people on the phone.
What's your favorite part of the business?
Speaking to somebody on the telephone and taking them from a very sad and frustrating point of view that they've got in regards to what their current situation is and putting them in the right direction, getting them back on track. Now, whether that's taking the first step and being proactive in regards to how to deal with the debt that we're talking to them on the phone with, or why they've got problems in their marriage, or why they haven't got a job because they're simply not out there looking for one, being proactive in everything they do. Having a positive attitude, being optimistic. It's amazing how many people come back to you after a couple of years and say, thank you for kicking me in the ass.
Well, and that's interesting because I've talked to a couple of the collectors on the floor as I've been working on other projects for MetCredit. And there are a couple of collectors who say they have customers that they collected from a few years ago and they call routinely for advice on their finances and stuff.
Yeah, isn't that amazing?
That, like...
Chocolates at Christmas.
Yeah.
Christmas cards, yeah.
It was crazy.
We were collecting a debt from them, yeah.
Yeah, like
it's
you're
amazing.
collecting debts and you're getting Christmas cards and candy. And one of the chocolates were excellent, by the way. Let's talk about the process from two sides. Let's talk about it from the side of someone that you're collecting from and someone who you're collecting for. So who you're collecting from, what's that like? You get that file and then you call and then what?
Well, actually, it's from the other side.
Okay.
Because what would happen is we would engage in a contract with a company, and based on what's in that contract, then we would formulate our plan on how we're going to collect that account. So, for instance, some commercial clients require the account to be sent onto their credit bureaus on assignment.
Oh, okay.
Now, I usually recommend against that. And the reason for that is I encourage them to have a period of grace of 30 days to at least allow us an opportunity to try to reach that person. Because there are certain times where a person simply didn't get that mail from a client. Yeah, strangely enough. Or didn't get that email if they're on electronic billing. Or they haven't got a phone call. Because maybe that person that's a bookkeeper at the small business says they're calling that person, but they're not really calling that person. So by allowing us that 30 days, it does give us some leverage in regards to attempting to get that account collected and still be in their benefit of paying it out. Now, after that 30 days, if we've given them an opportunity and it's gone onto the bureau, then at least we've given them that chance.
What's your actual target? You get a file, and how long, till you get, what's your target for collecting on that file once you have it?
Our ultimate goal is once contact is made for the account to be looked after within a 48-hour period.
That seems really fast.
We're very good.
Why so fast?
If you're creating a sense of urgency, that's the way you're going to have to get the account collected. You've got to do something different than that former creditor was doing. If they give them a month, you got to give them a week. If they give them a week, you got to give them 2 days. You want all their energies focused on one thing and one thing only, on how they can get that money together to avoid the consequence of whatever that consequence is. People would come to a collection agency for our expertise, and really they're coming to the agency now for our technical expertise, our legal expertise, and that's what sets us apart. So legal expertise is the laws across Canada have really been downgraded over the last decade or so, where before you used to have an ability to collect on a debt for 7 years. Most provinces are now 2. You can't litigate after that. And technical expertise is reaching a person. With the privacy laws the way they are, you can't just pick up a phone book anymore and look up Tom Jones. First of all, people don't even have landlines anymore. They have cell phones. Cell phones aren't published. Now, how am I going to find that guy? We will. We have the tools. We have the resources to do so.
When you're talking to prospective clients, so you're talking business to business and sort of corporate clients.
Yeah. Well, listen, yeah. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's consumer or commercial. Again, everybody's in a bad spot, okay? It could be the person that, they've got all this equity in their property and they just haven't been informed on how they can go back to the bank and get a second mortgage and pay all these creditors out that they're paying these enormous interest rates, Bay Zeller's cards at 28%, and just rolling all that into one. Or it could be a company that, has very poor bookkeeping, very poor urgency on collecting the receivables, and the next thing you know, they're in trouble and they don't have the money to pay their staff. Now they're using us. They've got the cash flow. They've got the money to invest back in the business. Their employees are getting paid. Everything's all wonderful. That's the magic of collections.
Why do you collect less if you wait longer?
Other than the legalities of it? Usually their situation gets worse.
Right. So this is a really human problem because they've got circumstances that are already bad and they're degrading possibly.
Especially when you're dealing with small businesses. Let's just say you are forced to go to court. The longer it takes to get there, more paperwork gets lost.
It just gets more expensive. I mean, going to court is just really expensive.
Well, it is. But if you haven't got the backup, you're dead in the water. One of the most challenging things in Alberta is collecting from people in the oil industry because they're on rigs.
So just the distance, or what's the deal?
Contact.
Ugh. They're just in the middle.
Making contact.
Yeah, they're just in the middle of the boondocks.
Like years ago, the little trick there was always finding out who the tool push on site was because you knew they always had a mobile number. Actually, that's one thing that's really changed in the business is people are tired or afraid to answer the phone. Okay, and that's really with the telemarketing industry. Okay, that's really killed our telephone contact rate.
Really?
Yeah.
So just people, the phone rings and they just...
I can relate. My son, my daughter, if I want to get a hold of them, I don't phone them.
Right.
I text them.
Right. If I'm the owner of a medium-sized business and I've got some debt and I really desperately need this collected, what do? I come to you and I go, MetCredit, help me, and then what? So what's the first thing that happens when I come to you with my companies? I've got some clients with debt. I want to hand it off.
We're going to have a phone call. We're going to feel it out a little bit. What type of debt it is, how old the debt is, ask some questions, what processes you take before you send it into collection, if you have never sent it into collection. Sign a contract, then tell you what we're going to do.
And how long does that take? What if I've got $1 million of debts that I need cleaned up, or $50,000?
If that small business is technically inclined, they might send us something electronically. It could be a contractor that walks into our office, brings a box of papers in with old invoices, and we enter that into our system. So it could be either one.
Oh, so you'll accommodate whatever's
Absolutely
going on. Okay.
We're grassroots.
What's your favorite thing about debt collection? Because you obviously liked it enough to think this is a good way to make a living, and you bought the business.
I love people. It's a people business. It's a people business training people. It's a people business talking to people. It's a people business helping get that help that the debtor needs. Debtors are people. We're people. Clients are people. What's the magic in the business? The magic in the business is that when we're contacting a consumer for their debt and helping them get that account paid, we're helping the debtor. We're helping the client. It's both sides. Now, because we're the middlemen in between, obviously we benefit from that. Mm-hmm. We are no commission, no charge. But it truly is a win-win scenario.
And ultimately, that's relieving a lot of social stress as well, because you're dealing with people who have all kinds of issues. And, those personal struggles are reduced. Business stress is reduced.
Once that monkey's off their back, yep, they're on to bigger and brighter things, whether it's on the consumer side and finding that job or doing what they got to do to get back on the right track, or the business, putting them in a position to do what they do best.
Now, you've really put your money where your mouth is in terms of people as well, because you've actually hired debtors.
Yes, I have.
So how does that happen? Can you just give an example of?
It's very simple. They can't find a job. They got the right attitude. I'll give them a chance.
Seriously, have you ever had someone saying, look, I can't pay, but if you give me a job, I'll be able to afford it?
Absolutely, all the time.
Seriously?
Yeah.
And has it worked out ever?
Absolutely.
Really?
Yeah. I've had people that work for me that have gone on to be in the Edmonton police force, lawyers. Everybody gets into a situation where they just need help.
Can you imagine a world where there wouldn't be debt collection? What would that be like?
Fantasy. It's not going to exist. It'll never exist.
So positing it as even a possibility is just not a thing.
People are always going to forget to pay their bills. People are always going to ignore their bills. We'll always be here.
And so you'll always have that magic.
We will.
Thank you to MetCredit President Brian Summerfelt, and thank you for listening. MetCredit is on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and on Twitter @MetCredit. Visit Brian Summerfelt's blog at blog.metcredit.com, which also includes some useful tools and calculators to assess your business debt risk. We want to hear from you, so leave a review, like the podcast, or share it with a friend or business associate, or drop us a line at overdueadvice@metcredit.com. Overdue Advice is the podcast about cash flow strategies to grow your business. Thanks for listening. I'm Andreas Schwabe.